Welcome to Advent of Tessellations. I've got everything I need to get started here right now. I've got my 16-fold grid on a hexagon. I've got two colored pens and my bone folder. So today we're going to be folding this cluster 6 front tessellation, which I call that because it's a cluster of 6 closed triangle twists all on the front side of the paper, and then we get these same clusters repeating elsewhere in the pattern, even though we don't have enough grid to get all of the next clusters right now. So when I'm doing origami tessellations, I'm talking about mountain and valley folds that are parallel to each other and form pleats. I use solid red lines for mountains and dashed blue lines for valleys. And for today's tessellation, we're going to start a little bit out from the center. So I can see in here, I've got some space around the center before we reach our twist. And I'm going to start by identifying the center of my paper. So since I've folded a lot of these, I can eyeball where the center is on a 16-fold grid. But what I'm doing is finding the grid lines that go to the corners and finding the intersection of those grid lines. Specifically, if I have the intersection of two grid lines that go to two corners that are not opposite each other, then I have a center for the whole hexagon. And then once I have that, I can see in my pattern, or if you're looking at the crease pattern, you can see it in there, that I have one spacing between the center and my next valley fold. So I'm going to go ahead and mark, and I do recommend that you mark these if it's your first time folding tessellations especially. And I'm going to put in a mountain fold next to my valley. You'll notice I ran that valley 3 grid spacings, and I only ran the mountain 2. And that's because I'm going to have another mountain fold that crosses the valley. So what you can see in the crease pattern is that there's another valley fold out here, there's another valley fold here, there's another mountain fold, there's more valley folds as well. But the really important thing to get started here is that we have the intersection of the mountain folds and one valley fold. And that tells me that I can take the intersection of these two mountains, combine them together to create a third mountain fold. So I've got a 3-way intersection here at the center of my closed triangle twist. And I can see the valley parallel to this mountain, which I will rotate my paper over, and I'll match that rotation in all 3 directions to get my closed triangle twist. Once I've got that twist set up, I'm going to push down on my paper just outside of 1 grid spacing away from the center of the twist. So I'm pushing just outside and then squashing it flat from the top and using my bone folder to finish the squash. Now from here, I need 5 more of these triangles in a loop. And there's 2 ways I can go next. I can go either on this pleat coming down or this pleat going out. But I can't go on this pleat because that pleat is going out to the edge, not around the center. And so I'm going to mildly randomly choose the one where we already have a valley marked. This valley needs a parallel mountain. And I can bring up that mountain and the valley, and where I meet the already existing mountain, I'm going to split or join, however you choose to think about it, and create another three-way intersection that I'll then put down onto the desk and push. And here I'm pushing on top of the neighboring triangle and push and get my next triangle twist. Now I'm going to do the same process again, but I'm going to think about it a little bit differently. So we know that from the center to the corner of the twist is one grid spacing. So then from the corner to the center, likewise, is one grid spacing. So at this grid intersection, one grid spacing out, I'm going to split my mountain fold. Now, which way does this rotate? Well, this pleat went down this way, so everything else needs to follow. So I'm letting the paper tell me what to do next. Now here we're at a situation that I like to call stair-step pleats. These are two pleats that are in the same direction, and they're laying on top of each other, so that if you are walking, you hit the stair and then you go up, and then you go up. So I'm going from the bottom to the top of the stairs. So this pleat is what I would call the top of the stairs. And I'm going to preferentially choose to start at the top of the stairs when I'm working on these tessellations that have twists all on the same side, because it gives me a friendlier pleat overlap to open next. So I'll start at the top of the stairs. Since we're in the same loop, I'm going to go one spacing out, split my pleat into the three-way intersection, and this is creating a pleat overlap. So I have pleats in two different directions that are overlapping, which we haven't seen before. And this is something that we will see over and over again as we go through Advent of Tess. Now, I have two pleats going out, and they're meeting each other, but what needs to happen is I need two triangle twists centered one spacing out along each pleat, which means that the centers are two spacings from each other. So I'm going to gently open the last pleat, then I'm kind of popping down. I'm using my finger that's underneath to lift up the three-way intersection on one of these triangles. And then I'm pulling from the back underneath the other new triangle center and getting both of those set up before I lay anything down. And this I can set up in a variety of ways. I can have this bit floating freely. I can bring it into the center. I can have my pleats arranged so that I am going to make closed triangle twists. And what I'm preferentially going to do is let it come in towards the center, and then one at a time, I'm going to take these long pleats and flip them over and squash a closed triangle twist, then flip the other and squash a closed triangle twist. So the key to this tessellation is we've got these loops of 6, these clusters of 6, and they're spaced out from one another. So the next one is spaced further. There's this extra 1 spacing gap between the corners. So how do we do that? Well, on each pleat, instead of going 1 spacing out to reach the center of the next triangle, we're going to go 2. And so I'll be able to set up the next closed triangle twist. So I found the grid intersection that's at the center. I split into the 3-way intersection, and then I followed the rotation direction of the pre-existing pleat to set up my triangle, which I can then squash. And here we've got these 2 parallel pleats that form stairs. And this pleat is at the top of the stairs. So I'm going to preferentially work from the top to the bottom. And at the top here, I've already gotten the far spacing between these 2 twists. And so all of the other neighbors of this twist out here will be near spacings. So the distances between centers is 2, 2, 3 for each of the twists that we're looking at. I already have a far neighbor here, so I'm going to need a close neighbor on this pleat. So this twist has far neighbor, it's going to need 2 close neighbors. This pleat's at the top of the stairs, so that's what we're going to work with next. Now this is getting close to the edge of the paper, and that's okay. So I'm again going to find my target grid intersection, set up the 3-way intersection, rotate my paper around to get that closed triangle twist, and then squash my twist flat. From here, I know that this twist on the pleat that was at the bottom of the stairs already has 2 close neighbors, so it needs a far neighbor. And that means that the center of the next twist is going to be 2 spacings away. And I can use that information to set up that triangle, and that's going to tell me exactly where the next triangle is going to be too. So I can lay one of these triangles flat, preferentially the one that's closer to the edge, and squash first one and then open up the other, and use my bone folder to get everything to lay down smoothly. So then I've been working along this line this way around, and I reach a pleat that's at the bottom of the stairs, not at the top. So I'm actually going to jump to the top of the stairs and continue working the same way that I have been. So I'll set up the far neighbor on the pleat coming from the central cluster, 2 spaces out from the corner of the existing twist. And then both of these 2 already have far neighbors. So they're going to need close neighbors. And on the 16-fold grid, we can bring everything in. I'm going to have that 1 grid spacing will be right up against the edge. And squash. So that sequence of steps of going around looking, I have stairs. I'm going to start at the top of the stairs. This twist already has a far neighbor, so it's going to need a close neighbor. Then coming down to the pleat that was the bottom of the stairs, I need a far neighbor on this pleat, which will tell me where each of the next twists are. And squash. Flip that pleat so we can get our twist all rotating around. And your twist might fight you, like this one is fighting me. And I'm just going to stick my bone folder in from the back side and get that ironed out. Then rotating around, I've got stairs again. And I'm going to put in far neighbor on the top of the stairs, which is a pleat coming from the central cluster. Then both of these two need near neighbors. And I can go ahead and get that twist in each of those twists in place one at a time. Then rotating around, now we have 3 pleats forming stairs. I'm still going to start at the top of the stairs. So it's the top because it's stepping up. This is over on top of this is over on top of that. So it's not that it's at the top of my page, it's more that it's the top of the geometry. I know this is going to be a near neighbor because this twist already has a far neighbor. And so I'll set up that 3-way intersection, which causes a pleat overlap. And these are exactly the same procedures that I would use to fold this tessellation much further out. Each of the twists, so you start your central cluster and then apply the rule. Each of the twists has 2 close neighbors and 1 far neighbor. So that's really all that's going on. That's the decoding, if you will, of the crease pattern. And I'm looking for, okay, does this twist have a far neighbor yet? If no, add it now. And then that twist already has a far neighbor, so it needs 2 close neighbors. And when you're folding tessellations, it often does come down to such simple rules. Of course, there are even simpler patterns that are alternating, like my neighbor is this, therefore I must be that. And we'll come to some of those further on in Advent of Tess. But for today, we've got this tessellation that features clusters of 6 closed triangles all on the same side. And when we come back tomorrow, we'll be working on a very similar tessellation that still uses clusters of closed triangles all on the same side, but has 4 instead of 6. So I'll see you tomorrow, and happy folding.